Right, step 31. What time does the class start?
7:30. Let's begin.
Alright, let's do it.
Parshas Nasso. So the first topic in the parsha I would like to talk about is sota, the sota procedure. So the sota procedure was a procedure that was done if somebody suspected his wife of committing adultery. So the guy sees his wife cavorting with a certain fellow, and he doesn't like the way things are looking. So he warns her, he says, don't hang out around this guy. And witnesses come and say, we saw that your wife was hanging out with this guy. So they didn't see them do any sin, but they saw that they were hanging out like he told them not to. So what do? They take the wife up to the temple, and there was a whole procedure that was done, and if the wife admitted that she did something wrong, she committed a sin, they would get divorced and she would lose her ksuba. If she didn't admit it, if she says, no, I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't commit any sin, then she would be, hi, there's food there, please take food, please be the first one. If she didn't commit any sin, if she did commit a sin, then she would die in a very unusual way. Her stomach would explode, and the person that she committed the sin with would also die, and his stomach would explode. And I'll just read some of the procedure. It was a very intense procedure what they would do.
Is this the carbon?
Well, part of it, there was a sacrifice of barley, but they would bring her in the temple and stand her in front of the eastern gate, and the Mishnah in Sota describes some of the procedure. They would bring her up, I'll just read it in English. They would bring her up in front of the court in Jerusalem, the court of 71 judges, and they would scare her, just like they scare people in a capital case. And they would tell her, my daughter, a lot of people drink wine, a lot of people joke around, and then things happen. You start drinking with somebody at the company Christmas party. Something happens. There's a lot of bad influences, bad neighbors, whatnot. Now, what they would do is they would write Hashem's name on a piece of paper. They would dissolve it in water, and she would drink it. And if she was guilty, she would die. So they said, you don't want to cause Hashem's name to be erased for no reason. Just admit what you did was wrong. And then they would take off her jewelry, and they would uncover her hair. Now, if she was guilty, again, she would die, and if she was innocent, nothing would happen, and she would go back with her husband. Now, the Ramban writes, he says the following about this. There is no law you'll find in the Torah that's dependent upon a miracle except for this case of Sota. Because basically, we are depending on a miracle for her to die miraculously if she committed a sin. The Ramban says this is the only time you see her. There's food in there. Please take. Okay. Now the Ramban adds that shehu palav v'neis kavua sheyashav b'Yisrael v'yisam rubam oisem ritzoni shel makom. This was a miracle that would constantly happen in the Jewish people if they were doing the will of Hashem. He chafetz l'man tzidko liyatzer hanashim shelo tasena kazimus yeser ha'amim v'linkol Yisrael min ha'mamzeros sheru'uyim la'ashras shechina. Because what Hashem wanted when the Jewish people were on a high level, that they should have no immorality in their midst, and that there should be no mamzerim, which is a mamzer is an illegitimate child, a bastard. There should be no bastards in their midst, so that Hashem's presence could dwell. So Ramban says this only happened when the Jewish people were deserving of it, when they were already on a high level. Once you're already on this high level where the majority of the people are not engaging in any acts of immorality, so to get rid of those people that are, this miracle would happen. So we see a few things from here, from the Sota procedure. One is that we see how much Hashem values peace between a man and a wife, a husband and his wife. Because this guy suspects his wife of committing adultery. So he says, let's do this procedure, and I'm willing to have my name be erased so that any suspicion that the husband still has will be totally cleared when she drinks it and everything is fine. Now he can know. He just has a miracle happened. It's God sending him a sign. Stop suspecting your wife. Nothing happened with that guy. Don't worry about it. Now, on the other hand, we also see how much Hashem hates immorality in this area. Because we say when the Jewish people are on such a high level, then Hashem does this miracle in order to remove all other aspects, all other areas of immorality, all other people that are engaging in this type of thing. Now, that's what I would like to speak about a little bit, the Jewish view on these issues, on the issues that lead to immorality, and what in Judaism's view on it, and how it's diametrically opposed to the secular world's view of it. So, the strongest desire that God gave to people is the desire to reproduce. And the reason is obvious, because Hashem wants the human race to survive. That's what Hashem made. Hashem wants more than anything. He wants human beings to live and survive as a race and to keep going. And Rav Yaakov Emden actually says that the reproductive organ is the holiest organ in the body because it has the potential to create life. Now, but on the other hand, in Judaism we know that any time something has the potential for holiness, it also has the potential for evil and creating impurity. It depends how you use it. So, the Torah permits this drive within marriage for two purposes. One is to reproduce, and two is because it creates a bond between a man and a wife. It's used as a vehicle for a higher purpose. That's how Judaism views this. Now, since it's such a strong desire, so Orthodox Judaism, Torah Judaism, I shouldn't say Orthodox Judaism, is really only one authentic form of Judaism, and that's following what the Torah says. You forget labels: Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, New Age, Reconstructionist, hippie, pot smoking, whatever groups of Jews there are. There's really one authentic form of Judaism, and that's following what the Torah says. Right? Torah is what Hashem gave us to follow. So, if you look in the Torah and then you look in the Talmud and what the rabbis enacted, the Torah is extremely careful about guarding this drive. Hashem created this drive in humans, and the creator of man who put this drive in people gave us guidelines about how to deal with it and how to handle it properly, specifically when it comes to males, because I think we can all agree that this drive is usually more problematic and stronger in males than females. So that's why we have laws of yichud. A man and a woman are not allowed to be secluded with each other. Also, a man is not allowed to hear a woman sing. That is also something which is prohibited. That's why in Orthodox schools, boys and girls are educated separately. That's why at weddings, men and women are separate, because the Torah has a realistic view of the human sex drive, specifically the male sex drive, and Hashem doesn't want us using it outside of marriage, outside of those holy ways of reproducing and creating a bond between a man and wife. So since such a simple thing, being at a wedding and for a man to see a woman dance, or even for a man to see an attractive woman could distract him, that's why the Torah is so careful about it. Now, if you contrast that to secular society, that is, as they say in Yiddish, I don't know many words in Yiddish, but this word I do know, Punkt verkehrt. It means exactly the opposite. We all grew up in it, so especially myself, I think it took me a while to realize it, just because I grew up in Western culture, and we don't really realize, but the whole culture, consciously and subconsciously, is just about fulfilling our desires, specifically the sexual desire, and becoming powerful and fulfilling our desires. That's like what everything is pushing to. That's why if you drive down Route 9 and every single ad you'll see, there's a very attractive woman selling something, or whatever it might be. Because that is the epitome. If you buy this product, you're going to have this pleasure and that pleasure. It's the exact opposite purpose. Instead, where the Torah says, no, you have to guard this drive and use it in a holy way, secular society explicitly and implicitly tells us, no, you should be fulfilling it as much as possible. That's the biggest joy in life. The biggest joy in life is to eat, drink, and be merry, specifically engage in these pleasures, and it'll be awesome. Everything will be great. That is the true form of happiness. And really, this goes back to a very ancient historical debate between Yaakov and Esau. This is really what they were arguing about. Yaakov was an Ish Tam Yoshev Olim. Our forefather Jacob was a simple, holy man who sat in tents and he studied Torah to get close to Hashem. Whereas Esau was a person who hunted, who sought power, prestige, to fulfill his lustful pleasures. So that same debate and fight that Yaakov and Esau were having is the same debate and fight that we have now between the Jewish view and the view of the secular world. And unfortunately, you see even parts of the Jewish world get influenced by that, and with the whole confusion of values. I remember, people like to poke fun at these the morals, let's say, of the Torah community. Oh, you're prude, and really it's just coming from misogyny, and you hate women, and that's why men and women are separate. It's like the most absurd thing in the world. I remember specifically somebody was making fun of remember the Internet Asifa they had many years ago, where thousands and thousands of people went to, not Shea Stadium, it's a new one? City Field. They went to City Field to hear from rabbis about the dangers of the Internet. And people were making fun of it, saying, oh, what are you going to drive your horse and buggy there? And now people are really realizing how dangerous the internet is, especially to students, and especially to young people. They're having now meetings in Congress and sessions and hearings in Congress about the dangers, because of the sexual nature of things on the internet, but also for the other things about how it ruins the mind, and people can't think because they're constantly getting a new ad every 2 seconds. But it's just interesting, it's funny to me that people are making fun of things that the Orthodox community did probably 10, 15 years ago already, and it was now Congress is finally catching up, and the American people are catching up to realize, no, this is actually a problem. Even in the United States, I was just reading recently that in the 1840s they opened up this female swim club in Texas, and they had to have a lifeguard, but the only lifeguards were men. So the male lifeguard, he had to turn his back to the pool, and they made him take an oath that he's not going to turn around unless someone calls for help because they're drowning. It's the only time he was allowed to turn around. See, even there used to be some morals in the United States also, but okay. Now, what is so damaging about engaging in this, being consumed by this desire outside of the proper purpose? So, a human being, what makes a human being a human? What makes us human? Why are we different than animals? The reason is because we have a neshama. We have a soul which yearns to get close to Hashem. We were created in the image of God. And the way we do that is by doing the mitzvos and by studying Torah and by using our intellect. Oh, there's food. Please take food. There's food.
Thank you.
Yeah, eat. There's yapchik. No, you don't have to be hungry to eat yapchik. It's good. It's good. It's from yapchik, the store, but it's not yapchik, but it's not the type of food you have to be hungry to eat. It's not like, okay. And also, a human being has intelligence that he can overcome his drives. An animal, all he can do is succumb to his drives. Just whatever he feels, he's got to do at that moment. But a human being has the potential, has the intelligence which an animal doesn't have in order to overcome that drive. He can say, well, I have this drive to do this now, but he uses his mind and says, that's not what I should be doing. And he can overcome that. That's why when a person engages in an improper behavior, and this type of behavior, he loses his uniqueness as a human being. He becomes like an animal. He's abandoning his intelligence, saying, I'm not going to use my intelligence, and I'm just going to go after my base desires like an animal. And he's also going against his neshama, which doesn't want to do that. That's why human beings were afraid of our private areas, because the private areas represent the part of us that is like an animal, has a desire like an animal, and it's shameful for a human being to be like an animal. It's such a thing as shame. I'm above that. I can't act like that. Do such a disgusting thing. Act like, no offense to the vet in the room, but act like a dog. How could I do that? I have a neshama. I have an intellect. I could overcome that. That's why Adam was ashamed. What was the first thing that after Adam and Eve sinned? They realized they were naked. And that bothered them. They were ashamed of it. Because before they sinned, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, that desire to be like an animal, that was something that was external. It was out of them. So their whole bodies, it was just pure holiness. They had no inner desire to do evil. They had no inner desire to rebel against Hashem. But once they sinned and evil went into them, they saw in their bodies the potential that they could sin and act like an animal. With that, that's why they were ashamed that they were naked and they had to cover their nakedness. But my point is, what I'm trying to say is that the Jewish people versus the secular world, our view of these issues is totally opposite. We believe that the purpose of life is to serve Hashem by studying Torah, by doing mitzvos, and fulfilling our desires is something that gets in the way of that, fulfilling our personal desires. No, we have desire. Why? Because Hashem wants more than anything that the Jewish people reproduce, and the world wants humanity, as a whole to reproduce, and Hashem wants more than anything that a husband and wife should get along. That's why we just saw the Sota procedure, that Hashem would go to such lengths to erase His name in order that a man and wife get along. And the sexual act is a bond which brings the husband and wife together, and it allows the human race to continue. So it's very powerful. However, Hashem said, I only want you using it in those holy purposes. Whereas secular society says the complete opposite. No, use it to have fun, have a good time. And when a person does that, we're saying that makes a human being into an animal, and he's giving up his intellect, and he's giving up his neshama, and he's not living for the reason for which he was created. And we know that when a person doesn't live according to his purpose for how he was created, he becomes depressed and sad, right? These types of things are fun for a little bit, and after, crash. The way a person is happy is when he lives according to his purpose. We, the human race, especially the Jewish people, were created to get close to Hashem. That's our purpose. That's what we were created for. So when we do that, when we fulfill our purpose, that's when we're happy. There's an organization called Vayimaim, and they try to, everything we're talking about is obviously very difficult to do, especially given the society we live in, right? It's very, very hard. I'm just talking in general terms, but let's be honest, these things are very difficult. We're constantly exposed to it. So my point is that we're not supposed to become perfect overnight, because that's impossible, but we're supposed to try. We're supposed to try our best. There's an organization called Vayimayin. They produce little 3-minute videos about this topic, about how to, specifically geared towards men, about how to be careful on these types of things, which I think is a very, very beautiful thing. It's someone just said the other day, what, you're such an animal, you can't control yourself? Well, yeah, God created men like that men get easily distracted by these things. Nothing to be ashamed about, that's how God created us. You're ashamed if you give in to the desires, but the fact that you have the desires is nothing to be ashamed about. It's an opportunity, on the contrary, that we can sanctify ourselves, because any time a person has a desire to do something and says, no, Hashem told me no, that brings a wild amount of holiness to a person. And the Gemara says something, I forgot it specifically, but a lot of holiness to a person when he overcomes that. And even if a person fails many, many times, those few times where he overcomes it still brings holiness. The fact that he fails doesn't impact the times that he was successful. So this organization, Vayimayin, produces these videos on YouTube. It was a very interesting one. I think it was in the 5 towns. There was a billboard. I think it was the Nasso Expressway or something. It was basically a pornographic billboard on the Nasso Expressway, and it's frequented all the time by religious Jews. So they're always seeing this every time they're driving near Kennedy Airport. So a guy in the Orthodox community in the 5 towns, I think it was Rabbi Feiner telling us over, said a guy actually went and called the billboard company and said, I'm willing to pay you, whatever the guy's paying you for that billboard, I'll pay you more to take it down. And he did. And he paid the guy to take the billboard down. Saying that's a commitment to Kedusha, to holiness. Can you imagine anyone in the secular world ever doing something like that? It's mind-boggling. Such a sensitivity he has to this thing, I thought was very powerful. Now, also, when we control our drives, there's a pasuk that we forget about. It's a very, very clear pasuk. There was a tragedy that happened in Baltimore many years ago when I was there, and the a bunch of tragedies that happened, and the rabbis got together, and the area they told people to work on was this area. To be more careful, these are called topics of kedusha, of holiness, because when a person curbs his sex drive and doesn't look at inappropriate things and whatnot, that brings holiness. And it says that when a group of people observe these laws, Hashem rests with the people. And it's an explicit verse in the Torah. He says, Hashem, your God, will go in your camp, to save you, and to give your enemies in front of you, to make them fall in front of you. When your camp is holy, and that you won't see any immorality, any nakedness, because then Hashem will turn away from you. So it's clear, when the Jewish people are holy and we're not engaging in these types of things, Hashem is with us. When we say, I want to give in to my pleasures, I want to enjoy X, Y, Z, look at things I shouldn't be looking at, Hashem says, I'm going to turn away from you. And that's why bad things can happen. Okay. Okay, so that was Sota. Now, another interesting part of Sota, I'll just mention, this is same topic, but a different topic within Sota. So we mentioned that the Sota goes in the Beis Hamikdash and has this very intense experience with. Imagine this is the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, saying, if you sinned, your stomach's going to blow up, and all these people are watching her and making her undress, and there's 71 rabbis sitting at the court, and all these things. And it was a very intense experience, and it was meant to scare her. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz discusses, what were they doing? Why so intense? Okay, if she's guilty, she'll admit it. If not, not. And he actually says, Tosfos says that they didn't even need the court of 71 rabbis, but the 71 rabbis went there. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says the reason was because you see how hard it is to admit you're wrong. He says, people would rather die than admit that they are wrong. And I think it's true. You ever have to admit you're wrong? It's hard. It's really, really hard. He cites another case of this. There's a story in Malachim, in the book of Kings. When the Jewish people conquered Jericho, Hashem commanded them, do not rebuild Jericho. You're not allowed to rebuild the city. If you rebuild the city, horrible things will happen. It says, Vayishba Yeshua Be'esasi, Joshua swore at that time, Lamor, saying, Ar ha'ish lifnei Hashem asher yakom uvana es ha'ir hazos es Yericho b'charo yisadena v'tzir yatzav d'laseha. It says, cursed will be a person who rebuilds the city of Jericho. With his oldest son, he will set its foundation, and with his youngest son, he will set its doors. So the pasuk in Malachim, the verse in the book of Kings, says a story that happened. It says, B'yamav bana Chiel, a fellow named Chiel, faced Eli as Yericho. He started building. He was from Bethlehem. He started building Jericho. So what happened? Ba'aviram b'charo yistav. He built a foundation with the death of his firstborn son, Aviram. Ubisguv tziro hitziv d'laseh. And with his youngest son, Sguv, he put up his doors, Kidvar Hashem, like Hashem said, Asher Dibur B'yad Yeshua ben Nun, like Yeshua ben Nun said. And Rashi says that it wasn't just these two sons, but he had other sons and they all died. Now let's think about it. The guy starts building, he knows about this. He was there. Joshua said, if you start building the city, your children will die. So the guy says, okay, yeah, whatever, I'm sure. I'm an atheist. Okay, fine. So even the biggest atheist, I would imagine, even Richard Dawkins, starts building the city of Jericho, and his oldest son dies. Food, please take food. His oldest son dies. Okay, he starts thinking, maybe stop. Okay, he keeps building the city. His second son dies. For sure at that point, any normal person you'd think would stop building the city. But this guy kept going and building the city because he didn't want to admit that he was doing the wrong thing. For us to admit that we're doing the wrong thing is very, very difficult. That's why we brought this sota. Hashem doesn't want to kill this lady. He wants her to admit that I did something wrong, I shouldn't have done. And then now go on and live your life. Do tshuva and live your life. He doesn't want people to die. But Hashem also, who created human nature, knows what human nature is to get her to admit something. That's why when a person learns Torah with a chavrusa, with a study partner, that also is supposed to bring to good midos, good character traits. Why? Because it's happened to me many times. You're fighting with your chavrusa. You think your chavrusa doesn't know what he's talking about, has the wrong interpretation of the Gemara, so you're screaming and screaming and screaming at him. He's screaming at you. You're getting all heated, and you know how it is when you get in an argument, and the other guy's wrong, and you're right, and you just angry. Maybe, perhaps, I'm not saying with Rabbi Bresler that I ever threw things at him, but it's possible that happened. With certain people, you get a little more heated, and then you realize your chavrusa shows you a Gemara that you didn't know, and you realize that you're wrong. After just the whole base medrash is listening to you fight with him for a half hour. Do you know how hard it is to say, you're right, I was wrong at that point? That's really, really hard. So,
I'm never wrong.
Right, there you go.
Unless my wife's wrong, I'm always wrong.
So when you're with a chavrusa, when you're with a study partner, that's supposed to teach you good midos, good character traits. Okay, let me just conclude with one more topic, which is not about the sota, is the Nesiim. If you look at the end of the parsha, it repeats the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. It says that regarding the gifts that the Nesiim, the princes of the tribes, brought at the inauguration of the tabernacle. It says the same thing over and over and over and over again. Please take food from there. So it goes 12 times, it says the same thing. It says, the leader of the children of Naphtali, his offering was one silver bowl, its weight 130 shekels, and one silver basin of 70 shekels in the sacred shekel, both of them filled with fine flour mixed with oil, and meal offering, further and furthermore. It says that over and over again. Now, the obvious question, why couldn't it just say, this is what the first person brought, and the next 11 people brought the same exact thing? Why did it just say that? Why does it keep going over and over again? So again, we look to the Ramban. The Ramban says, "Va'od b'zeh tam achar b'midrashim ki l'chol echem ha'nesim olav machshava lehevi chanukah l'mizbeach v'shetiyah b'zeh hashir. Aval nachshir chashiv b'shir hazeh tam echad v'zulasa kol echem ha'nesim chashiv tam b'fnei atzmo." The Ramban says that even though they all brought the same offering, the same gifts to the tabernacle, each one of them, when they brought the gifts, had a different intent, and their intent changed. Even though they brought the same, they did the same action, they brought the same thing, their intent changed the entire essence of what they were doing. He says a person's intent changes the action. That's why the Torah wrote it again and again and again. Because the same sacrifice, the same gift that Nachshon brought was not the same one that was brought by the other Nisim. It was brought by the other tribes. Now it says, the Gemara says, it's Amr Tanchum, Bered Rav Chia, Ish Kvarako Teda, Shari Adam Kari Krish Meshachar Zvar. The person reads Shema in the morning and the evening, V'erev Echad Eino Kari, Dom Mikmi Shelo Kari Krish Shema Me'olam. It says if you read Shema every day and you miss one night, it's like you never read Shema ever. Why? What's that about? So he says the reason is because the Shema that I read today on Thursday is not the same Shema I had on Friday. On Thursday I had a certain mindset. I had a certain intent when I did it. It was a certain day. On Thursday I was going through certain things. I had a certain day on Thursday. Friday is a different day. It's a whole different Shema. So I lost Thursday Shema forever if I miss it. I can't make it up. I lost it. It's not the same Shema that I repeat Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Every day is an entirely different Shema. That's why it says in Pirkei Avos, Huay Omer, it says, Im lo achshav emasai, if not now, when? That if I don't do something today, I can't do it tomorrow. It's food. Take food. Because my mitzvah today, I can't just say, oh, it's Thursday, I'm going to take a day off from serving Hashem. I'll serve Hashem the rest of the days of my life. No, you lost Thursday. Thursday was a unique day to serve Hashem that you'll never get back again. And it's not only with different times and different days, but also with different people. Often we think like, oh, what does my service of Hashem count? There's 1 million rabbis in Lakewood that study Torah 1 million hours a day, and they're serving Hashem. Why does it matter what I do? The reason is, no, it matters what you do because they're not you. Hashem created each of us that we have a unique way to serve Hashem, and He needs all of us. He doesn't just need the rabbis in Lakewood, He needs also Manalapan. He needs people to serve Him in Lakewood who are studying Torah all day, and He needs people in Manalapan that are going to work and coming at night to study Torah to serve Him. And one person can't do what the other person could do. That doesn't mean like you can't switch what you're doing, like you retire and you start learning all day, that's great also. My point is that every one of us was born in a different place, in a different location, and we have a unique way of serving Hashem, unique challenges to overcome that nobody else has. Nobody else in the universe has. It's a very empowering thought. So if I decide to take a day off, I can never make up that day. Or if I decide not to serve Hashem, nobody can make it in my purpose. Okay, so just to summarize, we talked about the Sota. We talked about how the Jewish people view Kedusha, view holiness, and staying away from immorality, how it's only used for the purpose of procreation and creating a bond between a man and his wife. Very, very important things, whereas secular society, which is the ideology of Esav, believes that it should just be used for fun and pleasure, and we talked about how that ruins the person's relationship to Hashem and how Hashem will go away from the Jewish people. Then we talked about how it's hard to admit you're wrong. That's why we have all these serious things going on with the Sota. And we concluded about the Nisim and how we all have a unique mission. And please take more food because I already froze it once and I can't refreeze it. So that's really the reason.